back here with my co-host, Bobby Stevens. Bobby, hello.
Good morning. Good morning.
And Bob, we got a great guest today. Who is our guest?
We have the quote unquote forever voice of the Orioles, the Baltimore Orioles, Adam Pohl. Adam, what's up?
Bobby and Dan, this is great. I'm so excited. I feel like the shoe's on the other foot. You know, Bobby was with me for 4 years, I think, in Frederick. God knows how many times I interviewed him. So I'm I'm glad to be on the other end of it.
All fantastic
the forever
interviews.
voice, the forever voice. And so you were with what affiliate are you primarily with?
I'm with AA Bowie, but you know, it's been pretty cool for me. I mean, I was a music major in college, and this is what I always wanted to do. But I mean, how do you do it? You know, and I ended up through internships working my way into the lowest level of minor league baseball or professional baseball. So I was in the Appalachian League for a few years. And then I went to High A Salem for 2 years. And for me, going to Frederick was kind of coming home. I'm from right near D.C., and I grew up a big Oriole fan because I'm of the age where there was no Nationals when I was growing up. So I would have definitely been a Nats fan or a Washington Senators fan, I guess, if I was a little bit older. But I'm of that age of the DC kids that are big Oriole fans. They still exist up here, and you know, in the DMV. And now that I've had a career, 7 years in Frederick, this would have been my 7th year in AA Bowie. It's one of those things where it's just unbelievable. Where if you would have told me when I started this that I'd be one of the longest tenured Orioles minor league broadcasters ever, I mean, I wouldn't have really believed it. So it's been quite a journey.
So where are you from in DC? I actually live in DC. I live in Shaw.
Oh, okay, great. I'm well, right now live between Bowie and Baltimore in Odenton, Maryland, right near Fort Meade. But I'm from Arlington, Virginia.
Okay.
My dad,
awesome.
you know, was in the U.S. Army Band, so he was stationed right there, and he's actually buried there at that Arlington Cemetery now. So,
Oh, wow.
So we have a major ties to DC.
Yeah, it's an
outnumbered
interesting area
today.
for sure. Yeah, you're outnumbered, Bob. You're outnumbered. Well, it's funny, like Bowie and I mean Southern Maryland in general is not that far, but it's difficult to make it over there, to say the least. It's very difficult.
Because, you know, Bowie primarily draws from Prince George's County and Anne Arundel counties in Maryland. But if there's no traffic on a day, I mean, driving from my household home in Arlington to Prince George's Stadium in Bowie, I mean, it's like a 35-minute drive, but you would think that it's across the world.
Yeah.
What's
my
that
sister lives in Gainesville, Virginia.
Yeah.
Whatever. Which is down 66.
Right.
And it's like 35-ish minutes to like the center of DC on like a clear day where there's no traffic, and it's an hour to get 20 minutes down the road on a normal work day. It's just silly how crazy DC is and how much you really have to plan your life. I went to a Southern Maryland Blue Crabs game last fall to get some footage that I use on like my YouTube channel, stuff like that. I had to plan really, really hard to not get stuck in just 2 hours of traffic. Like you absolutely, there's just so many, you have like these little windows that you just have to be in those windows to have any chance of getting anywhere.
It's weird because I broadcast Mount St. Mary's University basketball, and that's north of Frederick. I mean, it's almost on the Pennsylvania line. And from where I live, it's about an hour, 10-minute drive. But from work, it's an hour and a half. But if I got caught one day, I mean, I have to leave for a 7:00 game by like 3 or 3:15 at latest. And one day at work, you know how it is, and you get on a long phone call and get off, and I'm like, oh my God, it's 3:40. Well, it should be an hour and a half drive, and I need to be there by 6 at latest. I mean, I need to be there by 5:30. And I left at 3:40, and of course I got there at like 6. You know, it took me almost 3 hours to get there because
Yikes.
You just can't leave that late. You know, so it's one of those things where like sometimes in DC you can't get somewhere on time, because if I leave to go to the Mount at 2:30, I get there, you know, around 4. But I leave at 3:30, I'll get there around 6.
Exponential time jumps is just it's terrifying. So Bob,
talk to me.
What's new in Chicago this week? You're a little insulated. We're going to come back. We're going to talk about the Orioles a ton today and about Major League Baseball. But is there any Chicago news?
There's nothing. She's the
Your
mayor.
incompetent
Is,
mayor. I know. I do that too.
oh,
That she
God.
was.
She's brutal. She's opening the lakefront now, like June 22nd, so we can finally go by the lake. And it's a whole Adam. It's an absolute shitstorm in Chicago. I mean, talk about like whatever you
Yeah.
think could be wrong socially and politically is going wrong. I mean, there's aside from World War III starting here is pretty brutal.
Well, if you people don't get your lake time in Chicago, it's like why did
Why do
you
we live
stick it
here?
out
Why
the
do I
whole
live here?
year? The whole like literally the whole year comes down to getting your 1 month of warm time.
It's like
Everything
this.
has to
It's
be on
like
the
that.
beach.
It's like that Seinfeld where you wait all year for the 2 weeks of Mackinac peaches. And then
Oh
Kramer,
Right.
yeah.
you get
Yeah.
2 weeks of good peaches, and then Kramer loses his taste. That's what Chicago is. You wait all year for like that July 1st to July 15th window to go to the beach, and the beach is whatever. It's Lake Michigan. It's not the white sand beach. It's just water and sand. But you live here purely for that, and it's just shut down, and nobody can go. So it's
You
kind
know,
of it's brutal.
in
Adam,
a
have you spent much
baseball,
time in Chicago?
you know what? I've only been there once. It was but it was a long time ago, like 15 years ago. But my wife's from Minneapolis or Minnesota area. She's from outside St. Paul,
Mhm.
and
Oh, man.
in this same world, it's like there was a big talk when the Twins built their new stadium, and people in Minnesota were just desperate for it to be an outdoor stadium. But people that live like here in the DC area, like, that's crazy. Like, what's it going to be like in April? Or if the Twins are ever in the World Series, it could be snowing. But for them, they're saying, look, we get 3 or 4 months a year to be outside, and we're going to be outside. Like, I don't want to go to a baseball game, in the Metrodome when it's 80 degrees outside in July. Like, it's a miserable experience. So they love, and I see it now when Bobby and I were together in the Carolina League, almost all our travels took us south. Frederick was one of the furthest northern teams in that league, but in Double A, it's the exact opposite. Bowie is the second furthest team to the south. So when you start going up to New Hampshire and Portland, Maine, it's unbelievable because once they hit the month of June, I mean, they just pack that ballpark. People want to be outside in those few months. So it's a different lifestyle.
I remember that Minnesota when they built that stadium in Minnesota, because that was in Chicago. We're like, what are you doing? You have no business having an outdoor stadium. But even just do what Arizona did, make it retractable. Like, if you're gonna spend the $1 billion,
right,
throw a couple million on a retractable dome and
A
save
couple
yourself.
million. Do you have any idea the engineering it takes to make that thing work and not fall down all the people inside? Come on.
Yeah, about $2 million.
That's probably a $300 million upgrade. That's got to be super expensive. Those retractable roofs.
Worth every penny.
That's a feat of engineering.
How much money are you losing on the canceled ball games because of rain or because you start at 11 p.m. in Minnesota? Minnesota's got terrible weather. I mean, Chicago's bad. Minnesota's awful weather.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
It's brutal.
Yeah. What's your? I mean, aside from I've been to Minneapolis twice, and aside all the stuff going on aside, I think it's a really cool city. I think it's a super underrated city. How do you feel about your wife's hometown?
It's great. I mean, it's really cool being up there. I mean, obviously it's kind of the heart of what's going on right now, but politically and socially, I guess is a better way of putting it. But the Twin Cities, it's interesting because unlike where I'm from, I think the biggest thing that stands out to me is that, like, I'm from an area where almost the entire nation comes to live there to work in the government, or it's a very diverse area. And in the Twin Cities, it's the opposite. When you go to a sports bar to watch an NFL game in DC, you're going to see fans of almost every NFL team, fighting to watch a screen. And I remember going to watch my Redskins in Minnesota, and it was a day where the Vikings were playing on Monday Night Football. So they weren't even playing. And the Redskins, were, of course, terrible and playing a late season game that meant nothing. And I'm going into a bar to watch this game, and almost everybody in the bar is wearing a Vikings jersey. And they looked at me like I was like a like a dodo bird or something, like you've never seen something like this before. Like it's an extinct, creature. So Minneapolis, Minnesota, Twin Cities, you've got a lot of people that grew up there and stay there and are very proud to be from there. It's also the other thing that stands out to me. It's kind of weird, but it's a very fit place. Like if you go into gyms there, they're like 3 to 4 times the size of gyms here in the DC Baltimore area. And I think we have regular sized gyms, but like there, they just have such a need. I mean, everybody is very active, especially in a place where you're inside 2/3 of the year.
Yeah, how much of a premium is real estate over in DC right now?
Yeah, that was the first thing that came to mind. It's like, yeah, our
Right.
gyms are tiny because otherwise the economics don't work. It's already
That's
$100
right.
bucks a
That's a good
month.
point.
It's $100 a month for a pretty average gym up here.
2 treadmills and an elliptical.
That's what you get.
Yeah, if you want a really nice gym, like one of the like an Equinox. I don't know what Equinox costs in here in DC. It's probably like $180 a month for 200. I don't know, but pretty average is about 100. So that seems pretty reasonable. But yeah, I mean, in Chicago, I feel bad for you guys because it's a magical place in the summer. It's such a cool city in the summer. It's such a miserable city in the winter. It's still like kind of okay, but this is your time. This is your time.
You've got like June to you get like Memorial Day through Labor Day. Like that's
well, it gets cold really fast afterwards. I mean, it drops off in a hurry.
Yeah, there's no like middle ground. There's no like fall. Like fall's like a week where you've got like that. Oh, it's like 70 out and then it goes down to 60 at night. And like no, it's 70 out and it goes down to 37 at night. You're wondering where's my winter jacket? You can't even find it.
It goes from t-shirt to Canada Goose in less than a month.
It's brutal.
And if you don't have a Canada Goose jacket in Chicago, you might as well sleep in a dumpster. Like you're a nobody. You're a nobody. It's $1,000 jackets everywhere. So Adam, tell us a little bit about the pulse of minor league baseball right now, because obviously there's a lot of turmoil. It looks like the minor league season is not happening. I mean, is that officially confirmed or no?
I mean, it's just about is. Yeah. Obviously I'm a little surprised it's not official yet, but you're seeing stadiums that are booking events, at their ballparks for places in which they would have played games. So it's hard to believe this has happened. I mean, it's affected every industry obviously greatly, but it's a complete loss for minor league baseball. And if you think of it on a business side, it's such an effect over a 2-year deal because, usually for minor league teams, about 1/3 to 40% of the money they bring in is sponsorship money. So all of the advertising dollars for this year, they're going to have to be pushed to next year. The goal is to not pay your advertisers back and have them keep their money with you so that you're just doing their advertisement in 2021. And then of course, who knows what the climate will be as far as attending big sporting events in 2021. So it's not like, you're biting the bullet here, but you're back to trying a 100% revenue season next year. I mean, I know that there's a good chance that people's revenues will be 50 to 65%, if lucky, in 2021. So because of that, it's been a disaster. I really think that I'm very lucky to still be employed, but I mean, I really think about 60 and more like 70% of people that were full-time employees on the business side of minor league baseball have been let go. And many of them, I would say at least half or a little bit more than half of them. So 1/3 of the industry won't be back next year. And then in the same regard, for players, it's so tough because you have such a finite time to make it. Yeah. So it's going to stunt the progression and growth of even your top prospects. But, let's say you're a guy that just made AA and you're 24 years old in 2020. Well, you need to have a big season, to prove that you should be a guy looked upon to be a potential big league ball player. And if you don't get that opportunity, well, there's a whole nother crop of guys coming up next year. So I really feel for a lot of the ball players that we have. And, but to be honest, it's affecting everybody. I mean, down to the scouts and the staffs and everybody.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, people, think, oh, they're still young, but really, I mean, most guys get what, Bobby, 3 years in the minor leagues and they're done.
Yeah, I
You think
mean,
that's the average, maybe? So that's
Adam
33%
knows.
of
Adam knows
people's
as well.
careers.
Yeah, Adam knows as well. Anybody, even if you get 3 years in the minor leagues or 4 or 5 or however many years, I mean, your chance to make it is like 1.5. I mean, you only have like that age window. Otherwise, you're just a filler for the guys that are still in that age window, which is fine. I mean, guys, there are guys that sneak up through, that absolutely tear it up and get called up, or the stars align and they make it to the big leagues. But that's not the roadmap to get to the big leagues or play, in the major leagues by any stretch. So you've got a lot of guys. I mean, I know they let go, what was it, 1,000 minor leaguers got released on that D-Day of minor league baseball. But those guys, I mean, realistically, probably 99% of those guys would have had absolutely no shot based on where their organization saw them and the opportunities they were going to get. But it's still, you don't want to be the guy that, so let's take someone who had like my career where he got pushed into a position based on injury, did kind of well, and then you don't want to be that guy that's like got some momentum and then all of a sudden this happens and now you lose all your momentum and you also drop a year. Like you're a college guy that loses that year. I mean, it's not like being a high school guy where you might have a little chance to catch up. It sucks. I mean, there's no other way to describe it. The feeling it must be where you worked all winter and now what do you do? Now you're driving Uber. Like it's terrible. I mean, I've got a kid that works with me that does lessons and he's a year out of college hoping he's had indie ball lined up and that indie ball season's not playing. And I know it's, indie ball's a far cry right out of college from the big leagues, but you're talking about a kid who potentially, could get paid to play baseball and put it on his resume, professional baseball player. And he probably at this point has to get a real job and probably will not spend another 6 months training just for indie ball. Like he'll probably just enter the workforce and he'll never get that shot. And it's kind of bad timing. I mean, it's bad timing all around.
And then when you think about it, the double whammy is that it's looking like the lowest levels of the minors, the rookie advanced Bobby, you played in Bluefield, right?
I did I played
that. So the Appalachian League and then the next level up, which in the Orioles organization is Aberdeen, but the New York Penn League short season A ball is going to be eliminated. And what the minor leagues is going to be is all 30 teams with their 4 full season affiliates, low A, high A, double A, and triple A. So you think about it, and this is insane, but the major league draft was 5 rounds and teams are now signing these senior signs for $20,000 afterwards.
Yeah.
And it's hard to make, for some of the lower round picks. I mean, Bobby did so, but it's hard to make a full season affiliate sometimes in your first full year. A lot of guys would actually play in Aberdeen in their first season after being drafted and then hope to get up to like a low A. But there's a chance that if you don't make, you could get drafted or signed, go through spring training next year and not make that low A roster out of spring training. And you could be released without ever playing a professional baseball game. I mean, that's almost hard to comprehend, being a really good college baseball player, getting signed and never playing one minor league baseball game. It's wild.
It's so difficult to explain to people how it works. How does the minor leagues work? Do you just get moved up? Your second year you get moved to A ball, then your third year you get moved to double A and whatever. It's it doesn't work like that. And then you've got guys that are ahead of you. I mean, people don't understand double A's where Adam is at is kind of that's the level you want to be at if you're young. That's the most talent. That's where you make the jump as a prospect to the big leagues. Triple A is a lot of filler guys, guys that probably have been in the big leagues before. A guy that we've had on the podcast, like Zach Clark, where he's a guy that could probably step in. We had Zach on, Adam. He'll love it. He'll love some of those
Remember when he
stories.
was throwing knuckleballs? That was crazy.
Yeah, that's exactly what we talked about for the most part. But the AAA is like a holding pattern where if you just need someone to come up for a weekend because the guy's on leave or, for whatever reason, he's hurt, he's got a 7-day, 10-day DL, that's where you get those guys. But guys you're going to bring up for the long haul that are your big time prospects come from AA. So you're to explain that to people oh, you're in AAA. It's sometimes it's not as good. Sometimes it's not as beneficial to, like, for me as a prospect or me as a potential big leaguer to be at that level. And now you're getting rid of the lower level teams, like you said, the Aberdeen, which Aberdeen was, I never played in Aberdeen, but that Penn League is like, Brooklyn, Staten Island, like those are big time, those are cities that, like, towns that as a minor leaguer you want to go to, because we're in terrible towns a lot of times where there's just a Applebee's. So like that's a a league where out of college you want to go to that league. Like that's a good league to be in. It's got a lot of good talent, some nice stadiums, and that's just wiped out now.
So Adam, is that accurate in your experience that guys tend to take that leap from Double A right to the big leagues more often than not? Or, I mean, do you see like the premium prospects, when a premium prospect, a guy on the high up list, when he comes to Double A, do you say, okay, this is his last stop before the big leagues? Or do you usually see them go to Triple A after that?
I think now even I think most players that are major leaguers did play Triple A baseball. But I mean, look, if you look back, like just with the Orioles in the last 15 years, some of the biggest prospects like Manny Machado and Dylan Bundy, they never played in AAA. So I think the thing that stands out is a lot of times organizations are wanting guys to play at least a full season in Double A, and that's the major proving ground. And so if you look at the career stats of major leaguers, you'll see that they played a lot longer in Double A than they played in Triple A. So I think about a guy like Matt Wieters that had such a very quick rise. And Wieters was like a half season in Double A, 3 months in Double A, and then he played 20 games in Triple A. So a lot of times too, with the contract status, to try to get for a major prospect an extra year on the back end of their contract, they won't call up a prospect until late May. I know with the Blue Jays, we saw that last year with Vladimir Guerrero Jr., where he should have been to the big leagues right out of the gate, but they're trying to, make it so he's not a free agent for an extra year, especially in a year last year where they're probably not going to win. So you see it quite often where a guy will play a full season in Double A, and then the next year, there's a lot of talk about them, maybe being on the major league roster. And then, you see guys making comments about how they might just not yet be ready. And really, it's just a way to try to get an extra year at the end of their contract on the, before they hit free agency, and they end up coming up in late May, no matter how they're doing.
Right.
So what do you think going forward with, losing? So obviously the minor leagues are going to lose teams. Looks like one, maybe two per organization. How do you feel like that dynamic is going to change?
Well, for me personally, I started in the Appalachian League. It's just one of these things where it's going to hurt players that are drafted, in the later rounds, that are older players. It's going to give a chance to less ball players. If I remember right, Bobby, weren't you a 16th rounder?
Yeah.
So I think about guys like Bobby and like of his timetable, like Ty Kelly that reached the major league. You really have a chance to play for a long time if you have success as a minor league baseball player. And sometimes, we only think about the guys like the Garrett Coles that are making $36 million a year, but a lot of times guys that are later round draft choices either make the big leagues or are able to have a 10-year career. And unfortunately, this is going to make it so that less ball players have an opportunity. The other aspect, I think, though, is just the marketing of the game of baseball. I think half our country lives in major cities now, and half lives outside of it. And I think there is a feeling in the United States that how you're marketed to as a consumer, and everything is geared towards the half of the country that lives in major cities. And minor league baseball, not so much for a team like a Bowie that's right outside DC and near Baltimore, but when you think about teams that are going to lose their team like Billings, Montana, and Johnson City, Tennessee, and places like this, it's like that minor league ball team is is really one of the major things of their town. And that's sad. It takes away a lot of the quality of life. And there is a romance to minor league baseball in that, you're seeing people that are going to become famous before they're really known. And you're seeing people really pursue a dream, and it's a very affordable, family fun thing. So it's sad that a quarter of the industry will more than likely be taken away.
Yeah, for sure. And then you have like the economics of it, where a lot of these people do work at the stadium, and they're a lot of hotels and restaurants kind of revolve around that summertime period where the team is playing, and you got people coming in town, not necessarily tourists, quote unquote, when Bowie goes in to play Altoona, but you've got people coming into town to go eat at the restaurants, go shopping.
Oh, yeah.
Like there's a lot of,
just pumps a lot of money into the economy. Yeah.
One way to think of it is, Frederick, there was a time where the Keys were in a lease issue, and an independent team tried to come in and kind of take away Frederick from the,
I remember that.
That was a couple, 4 years ago or something. It was relatively recent.
Longer than that, I think.
Yeah, it was early 2010s. And what happened was that we did a lot of economic studies, and, the Frederick Keys are almost the exact same economic impact to the state of Maryland as the Preakness. And, the Preakness is one day, but obviously that's one of the most famous sporting events that the state has. And it brings millions of people here. And but for Frederick, I mean, it's over the course of the year, it's just about the same economic impact for the county of Frederick, and for the city. So Bobby's right. It's a big deal. I know that we with Bowie pay almost $100,000 a year in hotel rooms, for players and everybody that goes around with them. So hotels are, desperately want our business, because it's a huge chunk.
And you've got the minor league teams that do a really good job with production, like Frederick. There's like the stadium's lively. They do a good job in the community. They do a lot of with the schools. Like there's more impact. I mean, I'm sure there's people that grew up in Frederick. Like the Keys are their team, and that's not like, it's not the Orioles. It's the Keys is their team. That's what they follow. That's right. They have season tickets. Their kids know the mascot. They do the job fair at the stadium. It serves a bigger purpose in a lot of these smaller towns, a lot more than you would think if you coming from like a Chicago or DC or where major sports teams are prevalent. This is very prominent in the small towns.
It's weird too, because in the same way, it does help make major league fans too. I know like the Orioles were in Rochester, New York forever, Cal Ripken, Eddie Murray, and there was a lot of pride in that. And those great Oriole teams of the 70s and early 80s, a lot of people in upstate New York were Oriole fans, so it's strange, but we talked about that internally about Frederick. If Frederick does lose an Orioles affiliate, and let's say they would become a Nationals affiliate, well, that's a big market. Frederick is the biggest city in Maryland that has minor league baseball in it. And you don't want, it's kind of a mixed Washington or Baltimore market. It's almost equidistant between those two cities.
Yeah.
So, a lot of reason why more people are Orioles fans in Frederick is because of the Keys. And if the Keys were a Nats team, that would probably change, especially with, the fact that the Nats are world champions right now and the Orioles had the number 2 pick of the draft.
Yeah. I wonder. So the Nationals single A affiliate is the Potomac Nationals, and they're building them a new ballpark, so they're clearly not going anywhere. But I think is Hagerstown. That's a hike.
Yeah, that Hagerstown is going to be without baseball. That'll be one of these teams. I mean, they probably have the worst facility in the South Atlantic League. Kind of one of the funny things. I had a manager and they play at a historic. Whenever you hear that a stadium is historic, one of my old managers goes, that basically means it's shitty. Yeah, you know, so so it's a historic municipal stadium in Hagerstown, but that's like a 100-year-old ballpark, and they tried to get a new ballpark there about 10 years ago and failed. So
Yeah.
so they might be on the outside, and that might be the hole where Aberdeen would become, one of the 4 full season affiliates of the Orioles. And a Frederick or Delmarva possibly could become the low A affiliate for the Nationals, or, it might shake out. No one knows how it'll shake out, but that's just a guess.
Yeah, it's really interesting how the affiliations change just so regularly. I mean,
I know.
teams just, oh yeah, we're not the Rockies anymore, and we're now the Blue Jays. Like, oh, okay.
Yeah, I guess it matters
roll
where
with
you're at, because like I know Portland, Maine, like they're desperate to stay a Red Sox affiliate. Trenton, New Jersey's desperate to stay a Yankees affiliate, but we built our league in the Eastern League built an incredible new ballpark in Hartford, Connecticut, and they are selling that thing out every night. And they're the Colorado Rockies AA affiliate. Well, obviously nobody in Hartford's a Rockies fan, but all the other teams, Portland, Binghamton, which is the Mets, and Trenton, which are the Yankees. It's so important to those cities that they keep that affiliation. It means so much money, but in due time, I'd be surprised if Hartford doesn't soak up a New York or Boston affiliate, and then how would that play out? So it's kind of teams are always fighting, and organizations want their players to play in the best facilities possible.
Yeah, and the Hartford thing is interesting because the Rockies affiliate was right down the street in New Britain. Or they're the New Britain Rockcats, and now New Britain is in the Atlantic League. I played against them my last year in the Atlantic League, so that flip flop was interesting. It's like, why did you just leave there just to go down the street? But I guess it was just for the new ballpark. I mean, obviously, new ballpark always makes sense, but yeah, and of course they weren't. I don't think they were drawing super well for when they were still the Rockcats, but then their attendance exploded. I don't know am I remembering that right? That they weren't drawing well. Maybe, I don't know.
I mean, it wasn't a disaster, but it's kind of like one of these things where, with the Bowie Bay Sox, where Bowie is not the big city in our area. It's Annapolis, but when the team was put in, there was no national. So the thought was, let's put the team closer to DC so people from DC will come up and watch. And now, since the Nationals are there, like if you built a minor league baseball team in our area, it would be in Annapolis. It wouldn't be in Bowie. I mean, so I think that the ballpark can be an economic engine, and Hartford is a town that doesn't have much, things like nightlife, and it's kind of just a workers' town. Like you go in, you work, and you go home. So I think that the ballpark has been enormous in helping the restaurants because it's a block from downtown, and it's rejuvenating. They're hoping to build up around and make that area around that ballpark nicer. And you've seen that a lot in Major League Baseball. I know that I went to college in North Carolina, and it took a long time to happen, but that's happened with the Durham Bulls, like the Durham Stadium. If you walk around the Durham Bulls Stadium now, it's so nice. And if you walked around it when I was in college 20 years ago, when that ballpark was 2 or 3 years old, like, it was a really downtrodden area. So that's got to be the hope, and to bring more people into the city. But it's been an enormous success because I think they sold out 50 of their 70 games last year. I mean, it's unbelievable. I mean, it feels when you go to Hartford like you're playing in a Major League Baseball stadium. It's just a 7,000 seat stadium, not a 40,000 seat stadium.
Yeah. Have you been to a St. Paul Saints game since your wife's from there?
I haven't actually. I'd love to go. I mean,
what if their ballpark's still there?
They play in September too. We usually go up around Christmas time, which is the joke. We talked about the weather out of the gate, and there I am in Minnesota when it's -10. But the St. Paul Saints are one of the most famous teams in the history of professional, minor league baseball. Even though it's not minor league baseball, it's independent baseball. But it's been due to their promotions, and they have a new ballpark, or a fairly new ballpark, I believe.
Yeah, it's like only like 4. I think it's only 3 years old or 4 years old. And it's funny. I pitched there in their old municipal stadium, which again was one of those same crappy old stadiums. Hello.
Sorry, we have a visitor. This is little Allie.
Allie, welcome to the Morning Brushback. Making your first podcast appearance. quite young.
Yeah.
Good job.
Not her last.
She just wants me to change the song she's watching. So,
but yeah, so I pitched for Fargo against St. Paul. And I didn't know what I was getting into, but I pitched in St. Paul on a Friday night in the middle of the summer, and our bus is pulling up at like 3:00, and the stadium is packed, and the parking lot is packed, and you're like, what is going on? This isn't normal. There's never anyone here, when the visitors bus rolls up, and then people are just camped out there. They're just, did you ever play there, Bobby? I guess you didn't play in the American Association.
No, I never. I know St. Paul draws really well because I help coach the dogs team out here, and they always talk about how impressive playing up there
and
is.
So this Friday night, I guess it was just honestly a typical one, but they were completely sold out, and they had so many fans that they took that orange like fake construction fence, just like that's like a webbing you could catch dolphins in if you threw it in the ocean. They took that in the right field and left field lines, and they just like sort of roped off the corners. So let me catch you up, Adam. So
yes.
When I played in St.
I was listening.
Okay, so it was sold out on this Friday night that I was starting against St. Paul in their old stadium. And what they did was they took that orange construction, that plastic mesh fence, and they just roped off and made right and left field corners shorter. They just like roped off the warning track so they could fit 2 or 3 rows of just like folding chairs there. And I was like, what is happening? And the place was just mobbed. And it was a really steep one of those old steep municipal stadiums where it's just like all the fans go straight up right at the backstop, and just it was like over 7,000 people in a ballpark that could maybe hold like 5. It was just bonkers, and it was such a fun atmosphere. I actually beat them 4-1. My parents were there. It's like the only game I won all season. I pitched terrible that summer, but great that night. And so it just like you saw that, and you're like, wow, this is such a special thing, just like for this whole area. Like they had so much fun. The fans were there. Right. They're camped out. They're tailgating. It was just such a buzz. They were doing all this promotional stuff in between. It was just like so cool. And that's what's really sad that people missed out on this summer, because that's like the best thing you could take your family to, more so than a major league game. Just such a cool atmosphere. But yeah, they got a new ballpark now, so
that's great. Yeah,
and it's so close. It's so close to Minneapolis. I mean, I know Twin Cities, right? Like obviously they're close to each other, but putting a team right next to Minnesota, where I know Minnesota struggles to draw as well, like the Twins themselves. And then you've got a minor league team down the road that's just packing the house. Granted, it's a fraction of what the Twins would need to pack their place, but it's just like the loyalty of some of these, like the fans, like, oh, this is our team. Like St. Paul, this is our team. This is our team. Mm-hmm. And they don't feel that connection maybe with the Twins more, as much as they do with this local minor league team.
Yeah, it is a different product. There's no doubt about it. Minor league baseball than Major League Baseball. I obviously, when you're going to a Major League game, you're going to sit further away. You are watching players and a team you've grown up, rooting for. But on the minor league side, I mean, you're just right on the action. It's affordable. The players, are going to come and sign an autograph for you. I mean, it's a great experience.
Yeah, and you don't, as a single guy, I know Bobby's got a little one on the way and you're married, but you don't think about the expense of things until you start tabulating. Like my sister has 2 kids now, and it's like, all right, anytime they do anything now, it's 1, 2, 3 times 1, 2, 3, 4, right? So you go to a major league game and you are spending $250 to drive there, park, your 4 tickets, any food. I mean, it's probably more than that. And it's just so hard to stomach. Like, maybe paying $400 for a game because a $40 ticket plus your parking, your driving, a hot dog or Shake Shack at the ballpark just adds up so fast, and it's rough. And then all this stuff happening with money right now, like people don't have time for that. They don't have sympathy for that. That's what's really going to hurt baseball.
In the economic downturn, 2008 or 2009 in the minor leagues financially, what we saw is that our sponsorship money went way down, but the amount of people going to games went up. I mean, they really should run, perpendicular.
Together,
They should be, they're parallel, that is, to each other. But the reason for it is because nobody was taking vacations. Like everybody, that's when the term staycation came into being. It was like, hey, let's stay at home and instead of going to the beach and spending all this money, let's just go to the movies one night, go putt another night, go to the ballpark another night. It's so much cheaper. So, another thing too is like, you see the power, Dan, from your story reminded me of some, like, the power of baseball. When I started working here in Bowie, my wife and I, was the first time that we bought a house. And so you find out how all these things go. And amazingly, the guy that did the loan for my house is a former minor league baseball player. And he was probably in his early mid-30s. And his name's Chad. And I looked at his stats and I was like, oh man, Chad was good. He was a left-handed pitcher. He was kind of a late round draft choice, but he was back-to-back years at AA, with a 2.5 ERA out of the bullpen. I'm like, as a lefty, this guy had a real chance. And he finally kind of broke down and told me a story that, like, he went into spring training and knew this was the year, that final year of his career, and he hurt his shoulder. And of course, for a pitcher, that could be devastating. And it was for him. I mean, he never really got back. He only pitched one more year. He was out all that year. The next year, he pitched a little bit. His career was over. And he had told me that he had never gone to a game. It had been over 10 years. He hadn't been able to go to a baseball game again. And I told him, like, I knew he had 2 young girls, and they were very proud of the fact that he was a baseball player. But I was like, man, you got to take your kids to a game. So I gave him tickets to a Bay Sox game. And I saw him afterwards, after the fireworks show, and his girls had ran the bases because they were like 4 and 6 years old. And his wife was beaming. And I mean, it was like a big moment for their family. It was like they had overcome something internally. And I think that, it's really cool when you see that happen. And sometimes when you work at a ballpark all the time, you take, some of that magic for granted.
Yeah. Bobby, do you have that sort of experience after you retired? I think you hit the ground running a little easier than I did, but did you have that bitterness at any point?
Not really. I kind of eased out of baseball because I did my last year I was hurt with Southern Maryland Blue Crabs. I was hurt the whole second half of the year with a groin thing. And if we all know, as you get hurt in the minor leagues or in independent ball, like they're really not knocking your door down to pay for any surgery or anything like that. It's just kind of make sure you rest it and ice it. So that kind of lingered. It lingered, and I don't know if I wanted to play or let alone if I could. So then my last, I guess, quote unquote, playing year was in Europe, and that was like it was like playing, going from 140 games to playing only double headers on Saturday. It was like I transitioned out. Plus, I was in the Czech Republic living, so it was like a whole new life experience. So like baseball took me somewhere I never thought I would be. But it transitioned me out a little bit easier than, I guess, someone bringing you in the office and saying, hey, we can't use you anymore. Right. I guess I kind of got a chance to go out on my own terms, for whatever that means. Or I would have been told to stop playing if I would stay in the U.S. at some point. But I guess I got to make that own decision myself, which was nice. And I don't have any regrets playing wise or going to Europe was a great decision. I'd go back.
Yeah,
that's a regret.
And I had 2 gaps. So I had Tommy John twice, Adam, if you didn't know that. But,
wow, how about that?
So yeah, in those 2-year periods, like you have a lot of time, and you're home for the summer for the first time, and like friends are like going to games and stuff, and they're inviting you. And I went to one. I think it was after my first surgery, and my first surgery ended my college career. So I came back for my 5th year and had to sit through it, and then I hit the summer, and I was just like can't. It's like watching your spouse like cheating on you or something. I don't know.
No,
there was just this intense, like, I should be out there. It's not fair that I'm out there. These guys aren't better than me. There's just nothing fun about being on the field when you feel like and I've never been a person who's like, this wasn't fair. Like your life is what it is. And that's how I've always taken it. But you just know that the guys out there who got money, who are like on this list, they didn't earn anything more than you did. Their journey up the stream, like, all these salmon are vying to get up, to go spawn. And like theirs was just a little easier. or they just were a little lucky, and I wasn't lucky. And that feeling finally wore off this past year because I retired after 2016. I tried to play in 17. My shoulder was what ended me finally. For the 2 years after, I couldn't go to a game. And then I went to 2 Nats games last year just by myself, and it was nice. And it just, at a certain point when you get closure, for me, like I wrote a book about my career, and after that was done, that was a big part of my closure personally. And after that, and you started like go back through it, and you know who you are and what you did, and you realize that, you know, I don't have any regrets, and I was as good as I could be, and I could have been out there if things were different. Then you can go and watch the guys that are on the field and say, yeah, I could have been there. If things were different, I could have, but they weren't, and I'm okay with that now. And until you get to that place, just the ballpark just is not a good place. You just can't go back. So
yeah, I can see guys that don't want to go back, like be around guys. You're around guys that like, oh, I can't watch baseball. Like, right? They feel resentment. I don't feel any resentment. I just don't want to watch that much baseball. Like the game, it's kind of I'm more indicative of the fan that they're trying to get. Like, how do we draw somebody in for 3 hours to watch a game every single day? Like, I just not. You know, I'm much more inclined to listen on the radio, honestly, to a baseball game in general than I am to watch it, just because it's like it's background noise almost. Like I almost treat you not like a podcast of per se, but
it's like, background for me too. Yeah, I'd say the same thing. How do you watch games, Adam? I mean, do you ever get a chance to go to other games?
Yeah, you know, when I was joking, we when I was a kid, I didn't even know this, but like when my family came to the country 100 years ago, one part of my grandfather's family actually left Europe, or the Western or Eastern Europe, that is, and they went to England. So we've met all these third cousins over the years, and one of them is just a sports nut like me, and he loves baseball. And I joke with him that he went to more baseball games. He lives outside London. Last year, he went to more major league games than I did, because he went to the London series. And then he did a 2-week trip to the United States. He went to like 3 games. So it's kind of weird, because when you work in minor league baseball as a broadcaster and you're doing a game every night for 5 months, when it's over, you know, do you just want to go and watch major league games? It's tricky, because like a lot of it too is, you want to network a little bit with the major leagues. So you want to go there. So I try professionally to go to Camden Yards at least once a year. But yeah, last year, I think I went to 2 big league games. It's rare that I go to a big league game as a fan, but I love it. I mean, I think that a big part of baseball is really understanding the intricacies of the game. And I'm completely with Bobby though on this, that I think baseball's got a major problem in that the games are too long. And I kind of have a weird feeling on this, but the baseballs are so juiced right now in the major leagues. Yeah. The proof to me was what happened in AAA baseball last year. I mean, it was unbelievable. And, last year the Norfolk Tides hit the same amount of home runs they had done as a team the year before in their 71st game out of 140. So they were hitting double.
For those of you listening, this is because they switched the major league ball, right?
Correct. They went from the minor league ball to the major league ball. It was also funny because
that's
the
laughable. That's crazy.
We went to the finals last year, and of course the Yankees ended up pulling up multiple major league pitchers. The Yankees had so many injuries last year, and they had Severino and Betances. But major league rehabbers, people don't realize this. When they make a rehab appearance, they pitch with a Major League Baseball, and it was unbelievable. Like, we did better as a team against the major league pitchers, because there was a line drive to center, and their center fielder ran in 2 steps, and then was like, "Oh my God!" And that ball sailed over his head by 15, 20 feet, and it was a huge triple for the Bay Sox. But I think that. One of the big things of the game of baseball is that the home run has become what every hitter is trying to achieve, with the, how they swing the bat, try to get more elevation and loft, trying to not hit the ball into the ground. And because of that, pitching has changed. You're seeing the 2-seam fastball go by the wayside, which, like even 10 years ago was so prevalent. I mean, everybody was throwing a 2-seam. I almost feel like in 2010, you'd see more 2-seamers than 4-seamers. And it was all about keep the ball down in the zone and try to get contact. and try not to have these deep counts. And now the game of pitching is all about trying to strike everybody out. So the game is going longer, and you're seeing four-seam fastballs, high fastballs, changing the eye level. Guys are swinging up at the ball, so therefore, you're in a situation where due to the fact that they're swinging up at the ball, you can really get them with that high heat. It's really hard to hit a high fastball. And you're just seeing more home runs, and you're seeing way more strikeouts. And so there's less balls being put in play. The games are lasting longer, and there's less strategy to the game. The game basically is whoever can hit the home run, and I think that's unfortunate. I really think deadening the baseball, putting in a pitch clock, doing whatever you can to make it a 2-hour 30 to 2-hour 45-minute game, where there's value to more players than just guys that have big power is really where the game should be looking at heading.
I agree. And it's funny. So this was an illegal thing that I did, but I took my camera to the Nats game and I tried to get a little bit of footage to use for YouTube and whatever. And I got some photos too.
You felon.
I know. I'm such a monster. But one of the big things I was trying to capture, because I use this to help teach the game on the web. I think it's, you're not going to get slow motion video of good players unless you go to a game and get it yourself. I mean, there's some, but not that much. At least I like some of the little things like fielding a ground ball, like their technique doing that. Like they're not going to slow motion that. They're going to do a pitcher and hitter. So anyway, I'm trying to get ground balls. I'm trying to get to watch an infielder in slow mo fielding a ground ball and the way they throw. That was like kind of on my list of things I wanted to catch. It was so hard to get a ground ball in the big league game because no one's hitting them. And that's when you really start to realize that, they're striking out or they're flying out. And then I went to an Atlantic League game like the next week, and there were so many more ground balls. It was like, these are completely different games. Like if you haven't been to two to compare them, they're so different. Like you literally can go 4 innings without seeing a ground ball sometimes in the big leagues, it seems like. That's probably not exactly true, but the ratios of strikeouts and fly balls to ground balls is so much different than in lower levels of baseball because it's just the way they change it. And of course, in the Atlantic League, they love hitting dingers too. So many guys are ambushing. It's not like they're trying to hit ground balls because they're not. They're trying to hit 25 jacks by the All-Star break and get signed, right? But the game is just so different. So yeah,
I think the problem Major League Baseball has, in my opinion, it's what made baseball great is the frequency of baseball. Like it's hard to dedicate daily 3 hours. I mean, the length of the game, like football games go 3.5, 4 hours. Nobody's complaining about football games. Granted, there's probably more action going on in between football games, but there's really not. I mean, you get 8 seconds of action followed by
3.5 hours of baseball is boring.
But 3.5 hours of baseball once a week frequency would be just as popular as football. The problem is it's 3.5 hours, 7 days a week. So I don't think baseball can, like 2 hours and 45 minutes and 3 hours and 15 minutes makes no difference if it's daily, because it's daily. Like that's the fact that it's daily makes it so much more difficult to draw fans in. Because I relate it to working out. Like I like working out. I enjoy going to the gym. I can't go to the gym an hour and a half every single day. I just don't have the time. So I don't know
the people that do that, they're not really working that hard.
But even if you're doing it, like it's just hard. It's just hard to find the time. Like people just don't have that amount of time daily. And you're selling season tickets and you're selling 81 games to a major league season is insane.
I know.
Like who can attend unless you're retired? Like it's insane. So I think it's the more so the frequency of baseball where you've got it, 28 out of 30 days a month. How do you draw? And you're drawing from there's only so many people that like baseball. It's not like you're drawing from the whole population and you're like, oh, we could find 30,000 every single day. No, you're trying to find 30,000 of that select group of people that actually like going to baseball games and that can afford going to baseball games. So your pool is so much different than like a football fan where you might go to one football game out of 8 a year and you might not even be that big of a football fan, but that's like a whole daily event. It's like going to a concert almost.
I have two thoughts on that. First of all, that makes baseball what it is because obviously half the players on a team are pitchers. And like, if you think about if football played 162 games, or if let's say that Tom Brady could only play 2.5 quarters once every 5 games. You know, like Clayton Kershaw, you know, when he was at his apex, or Garrett Cole now. I mean, out of 5 starts, so what is 5 times 9? You know, 45 innings, he's going to throw like 6 of those 45 innings. You know, I mean, it's unbelievable. Right. Like if he was a goalie in hockey or a quarterback in football, he would be out there for all 45 innings.
Right.
So that makes baseball unique, and it's the reason why, obviously, even the best baseball teams still lose like 60 games a year. But but thinking on it from a different level, like I took over running marketing in Frederick in that era, Bobby, when you played. So I was in charge of how many fans came to games, and you know, one thing that we did was not market every game. You know, and you like that sounds crazy, but like, there's 70 games, and we thought of it about marketing the 33 games that were the weekend games. You had 11 weekends. So all of our money in advertising was all trying to get as many people as possible Friday through Sunday. And then the other days of the week, it was just giving them a deal. Like, oh, if you come tonight, you get a 2-for-1 hot dog, or, you know, like if this
$1
happens,
beer night.
Yeah. You know, where you're looking for people that want to come for as cheap as possible. But you only have a finite amount of money to spend on advertising and everything. It's hard to pack a place, you know, 70 games or 81 games a year. And working in baseball as long as I have, and you guys have lived this life, how many times have good college buddies that are not in sports asked you to go to a concert, or, oh, did you hear this? Did you get an invitation to this guy's wedding? Or you know, hey, what are you doing Memorial Day weekend? We're throwing this big party. You're like, dude, I'm completely like
no shot.
There's no shot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, maybe if someone in my family gets married, I can go. That's about it.
That's about it, Dan, ain't it?
Yeah.
I got Mike on Periscope responded to us. He said, as someone who never played baseball as a fan, I can say it's very relaxing to watch a minor league or a major league game. He said, I enjoy watching the game unfold. It's strategic. And I agree with him. Like, I don't disagree, but it's relaxing once or twice a week. Like if you have the time to set aside to watch baseball every single day, like I envy you. It's a time commitment that a lot of people don't have. So you're trying to draw so many people to a major league game that like a Fenway or a Yankee Stadium that can hold 45,000 people or Wrigley Field. So you're trying to draw 45,000 people for a homestand every single game. That's a quarter of a million people like throughout the week. And
it's a lot.
And it can't really be the same person twice. Really, I mean, realistically, it's probably not going to be the same person twice. I mean, where are all these people coming from?
Another thing I think too, and that's in the same vein, is that, and you guys, I'd like to hear what you think about this. I feel like teaching the next generation the intricacies of the game is so important. And part of my last rant about the home runs and the strikeouts means that the intricacies of the game are less important. But understanding, like Dan, you know, having people that go to a game understand that you are a completely different pitcher when you're ahead of the count 0-2 than when you're down in the count 2-0. And, you know, we're understanding like it. I didn't know this until I was broadcasting, that a lot of times when you throw over to first base, like in a possible bunting situation, you're not trying to like get the guy out. You're trying to see if the guy is bunting at the plate.
Yeah.
There's little intricacies of the game that like, even if you grew up around the game like I did, you don't even know. And then you get into minor league baseball or professional, you're like, whoa, that's pretty cool. But I feel like the more you know, because baseball is at a very different pace. And, you know, football is kind of, and hockey, it's at such a fast pace. It's hard to absorb a lot of the details of strategy. And one of the reasons that baseball is so much fun is that it unfolds at a pace where if you really know the game, you can be like, oh my God, look, they're doing, you know, or he's going to work him away because he's going to try to get him to roll over on the, you know, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And it's just like anything else. I mean, I'll give you an example. My, like in my YouTube stuff, I've learned more and more about video and how to like make my videos better in the same amount of time. Like you start to learn any new skill and you start to go down the rabbit hole. So now, having learned a good amount about video and audio and transitions and the way they do different things, now when I watch a movie, especially a documentary, I can see things that I never thought to see before. Like I actually noticed their mics. I look for their mics. I'm like wondering where their microphone is, because sometimes they'll have a lav mic. Even on like prominent documentaries, you don't think about, like, you never see a mic in a movie, obviously, but in a documentary, like the rules are a little different. You start to pay attention to how they move from one scene to the next. You know, is it a black screen? Is it just all these different things? Because for me, I'm trying to figure out, what do these people do in the documentary, as if I make a documentary style YouTube video that's 10 minutes long or something.
Right.
And it's the same thing with baseball. There's stuff that it would never occur to you to look for that's happening. It just would never, ever occur. You'd never see it. And I taught baseball in Turkey last year.
Oh, wow.
And they have they have as much baseball knowledge as you'd think. They don't have any, there's no books. YouTube's not translated into their language. They have no former players in their country to pass down information. They're just like starting from scratch. And one of the huge problems is they'll never discover a lot of that stuff because they'll never know to look for it. Like you said, throwing over to figure out that a guy's bunting. If no one in the country knows that that's a thing, how would they ever figure out that that's a thing? That's what's fascinating about it, right? I mean, it's crazy. I mean, and so that's one of the really, like you said, it's really neat. And I'll give you one other quick example is that I was watching a game with a girl who's a huge baseball fan. And she was like, hey, can you tell me which pitch they throw? It's hard for me to identify them. And for me on TV, it looks super easy to tell the difference between a curveball and a fastball, right? Yeah. And for someone who's been doing it a long time, and to me, I was like, oh, and she's not dumb. Like she knows the game. She studies it a lot. She like loved it. But she just still needed help to see the different pitches, even though I thought it was pretty obvious. And then when you go to a real game, it's super hard to tell the difference unless you're a former player. You do it all the time because it's not nearly as obvious as the camera view from center field. And so just little stuff like that where you help someone learn. Yeah, when that's the shape of it, that's probably a slider. That's probably a curveball. Right. But it's really tough. It's really tough at the ballpark.
Dan, a funny thing from last year is that, and it's something that nobody knows, but my biggest call from last year that got a lot of publicity was that we had a no-hitter thrown. And from a prospect, and the dude, his name's Mike Bauman. He was new to Double-A, and I cheat. I look at the radar gun. I'm like, look, if it's in the 90s, it's a fastball.
Well, you have to.
If a guy throws fastball, curveball, change, it's very easy. Because a lot of times the changeup is in the 80s and the curveball is in the 70s, right? So it's like, boom, there you go. I mean, it's easy to tell the difference a lot of times between those pitches. But sometimes a fastball or, if a guy's throwing a slider or a change, sometimes you can kind of miss it.
Very similar range, yeah.
But Bauman on the last pitch, he messed up. And, and as a pitcher, sometimes everything's going your way. He threw a hard slider and it hung. It was belt high. And the guy swung right through it. And it ended, the no-hitter. But it was a 91 mile an hour slider in the ninth inning. And I thought it was a fastball, especially since, if the guy threw it in the dirt, it's probably a slider. But like if you're going to see a 2-strike pitch that's above the belt and it's in the 90s, it's a fastball. So I call it, high fastball, swinging him at strike 3, yada, yada. And afterwards he goes, Adam, just let you know, he goes, I hung a slider there. So every time I watch that, they did a big interview with him on the Orioles thing, Mass, and of course they played the call, and I'm like, there I am messing up the call, and nobody even knows it.
Well, how hard was he throwing the whole game? Probably mid to upper 90s then?
More like mid. I mean, his fastball is more like 94, 95. Yeah.
Gotcha. So he probably just threw that slider super hard, like super humped up on it. So if it was a fastball, that one might have been his hardest of the night, like 98, but it was a slider, so it came up hard. That's and that's an interesting point. Like with sliding, velocities are always a range. So if you're throwing 92 to 96, your slider could be, 84 to 80, or more like 86 to 88, whatever, And
you see it like with a guy like Verlander, and who might be the best power pitcher of this generation, right? Where he might be throwing 92 in the first inning, and then all of a sudden he's got like another gear, like he's throwing 96, 97 late in his start, and you're like, wow, that's crazy.
Yeah, it's definitely got to be difficult for you to sit far back in the press box. You're just watching the game with no radar gun at some of these.
It's a tough angle. Everything looks straight from there. And curveballs, and sliders don't have as much lateral break as you'd think from that vantage point. they're not that sweepy.
If at all,
Yeah.
if at all, like I mean, you take your eye a split second and you're just guessing, like at that point, like, oh, here comes the pitch. It's a strike. You don't know what it is.
Exactly. And the funny thing is, in the minor leagues, they're starting to put us like down the line a little bit, because people will pay more money for a suite right behind home plate, which is usually where all the broadcast is. So a lot of times the new ballparks, like a Hartford or such, they have like the worst broadcast angles because you're sitting at third base trying to call a baseball game.
Oh, that's rough. And that's why, and that's why I don't understand. I've never been like a big arguer as a player, and I never call games. That's something I'm pretty adamant about. I think young players should call their own game on the mound. Mm-hmm. And one of my main arguments is like, I can't see what's going on from the side. Like we act like we do. Like we act like we're outraged about a call. They're like, oh, that was a strike. It's like, you don't know. Like, just be honest. You don't know. You're just guessing whether the catcher moved his mitt, right? That's all we're going on.
Oh yeah.
It's true. That is true.
But yeah, it's a tough angle. The center field angle is amazing. Of course, even that they mess up. Like the Rays they have a really weird one. I feel like the Astros a little bit off.
It's funny though,
like why they tolerate it.
If you listen to a visiting broadcast from Nats Park, they have by far the worst broadcast locale. It's like literally on top of the stadium, and everybody can't figure out if like a fly ball is like a pop up to short or a home run. And it's funny, if you listen to the visiting broadcast from Nats Park, everybody complains. It's pretty funny.
Yeah. So let's as we kind of wrap up, let's talk. What do you think is going to happen? I mean, Major League Baseball is in turmoil right now. Yesterday was a big day with Manfred 5 days ago saying, I guarantee we'll play baseball. Then tomorrow going back on that, leaving a lot of people feeling pretty deflated about it. I mean, what's your intuition? I know you don't probably have any inside info, but what do you think? What's your gut?
I was just so confused by it. When you're a commissioner or something like this, it's really a public relations job. And it's just been a nightmare how they've handled it. When you do things like this, you need to play chess, not checkers. And it just feels like Rob Manfred is playing checkers, like a move is made and then he's like, oh my God, like I didn't realize this was going to happen. And then he's trying to deal with it and he can't. So what I think is going to happen is simple, that the major league teams want the players to only play 50 or so games because they think that can fit their economic model okay for the season. And I think what they figured out was that they were going to just implement that. They were trying to have the players play 70 games and do it for 80% of the money. But now what they realized is that you still have time. You still have time to play, 60 or 70 games.
Right.
And the players could sue and get that money back. And I think that when the owners figured out that could happen, they're now saying, oh my God, we got to go back to negotiating. And they're going to wait a few weeks until there's only time to legitimately play 50 games. And then they'll do what they were trying to do right now. So that's my take on it. I think a good Twitter to follow would be Trevor Bowers.
Yeah, he tweeted out that theory essentially.
His Twitter theory I thought was very interesting. And he came up with a date. He said, watch how their tune will change on June 28th. Because he did the math and that was,
that's like the day, That's
the day when where it would fit that timeline. So yeah.
It's a shame. Bobby, where do you fall on it?
The biggest issue with both sides has been the messaging. Like you've got incompetent leadership on both sides. Like the players aren't being instructed to stay on point. Like they keep talking about money, which is making fans turn on them essentially, because as many fans understand, like, yeah, if you play 100 games, you should get paid for 100 games. There's fans that are like, look, some of us have been out of work for 3 months. Like, shut up about however much money you might lose and take the money you're going to make and go play and give us something to watch. Like, so and then you've got the owner's side where you've got nobody sympathizes with billionaires. So the more Rob Manfred speaks, the more you dislike him. So, I mean, both sides, I think the players they're being thrown, they're not being led well to to get the fans and get like momentum on their side to push back against the owners, because you've got people that are also divided on their thoughts about the players and being greedy, and like everybody's taking pay cuts and making sacrifices. Like, why aren't you guys willing to make some sacrifices? And it's crazy that people are siding, some people are siding with billionaires, and I can see both sides. It just feels like the more Trevor Bauer speaks out and the more that a couple of these guys on Twitter voice their opinion, like, yeah, it's great that you hear from big leaguers, like that they have a voice, but their messaging is so wrong about what, like, stay on point. Like, we want to get back to playing. We want to make sure it's safe and healthy for us. Like, hammer that point home in every interview, stay away from the money talk. So all the fans rally behind you and they put pressure on the owners. Like, there's no pressure on the owners right now because some people are actually siding with them. And Tony Clark, I think, is doing a terrible job of keeping the players like united in one message. I just think he's not taking advantage of what should be fan backing on the player side.
Yeah, it's I don't know what Tony Clark's qualifications are to do the job. I mean, I'm sure he's qualified, I guess, but it seems like right now the negotiation tactics from both sides aren't very good.
Yeah,
so it
they're
seems
just
like
not.
On the surface.
They're
like you said,
job.
I think I agree with you, Bobby, that the messaging should be, we miss you guys, we miss you fans, we're trying to get back there, let's play ball. That should be the message. And the more they mention money, just the worse it gets. And of course, a lot of, a couple players early really made some missteps talking about, I'm not going back if I don't get paid, that kind of thing. And not the move.
Blake Snell, I mean, for as much as he may have been right, like, look, I'm not playing for less than I'm worth or whatever. Like, you can believe it all you want, but don't say it out loud immediately. Like, somebody tell this guy, like, look, dude, let us do the messaging about the safety of the game and about, we want to be back in front of fans. Like, let's get this done. Even if behind the scenes you're saying nothing but we're not doing it unless we're getting paid. Like, you need to, and Adam's a daughter obviously agrees with me.
Yes.
You have to have one united front, and they just don't. And like Trevor Bauer's voice out, is head and shoulders above Tony Clark's voice right now, which is absurd when you're the leader of a union. Like, you need to be front and center. And I think some of the owners are definitely
to be fair,
with Manfred.
It's not clear that what Bauer's saying is benefiting the players.
I'm not saying it's
himself,
benefiting.
being outspoken, and
he's just louder. He's the loudest voice in a room with no leadership. And Rob Manfred is the only voice in the room for a group of billionaires that are. I can't imagine behind closed doors he is very popular amongst those owners right now. Just based on how much he's flubbed some of this messaging.
Yeah, it's a good question. So Adam, final story. What's do you have a good anecdote? I'm sure you have tons of them from your years broadcasting, but do you have a favorite story? On field.
I want to tell a Bobby story. One of my favorites.
Let's do it.
Yeah. Well, I have a few. My daughter's bumping down, sadly. I have a few here, but one of my favorites that I know that he won't even know that I'm talking about is, when you go to Myrtle Beach in the Carolina League, Bobby talked about these cities, and nothing against Lynchburg, Virginia, and Wilmington, Delaware, and all these places, but the reality of them is that when you go to Myrtle Beach in the Carolina League, it's time to party. That's the place with the nightlife and the guys are hoping to play that 2-hour, 15-minute game. Right? It was the first night that we were in Myrtle Beach, and we got in very late the night before. So it was the first night that the team was going to go out on the town after the game. And of course, what happens. We played a 14-inning, 4.5-hour game, right? So it was scoreless, if I remember this correctly. I don't even think it was 1-1. It was a scoreless game. And if you know Bobby, and if you're watching the show, you probably know Bobby's personality. But he he was such a jokester. His song was "Call Me Maybe," which was the big pop song of that time that everybody like hated because it was overplayed so much. Bob was like, "No, I love
so
it."
bad,
Right?
so bad.
So
Love
bad.
that song.
So they played "Call Me." Bobby was leading off the inning, the top of the inning. They played "Call Me Maybe," or whatever is, if that's the name of the song. They played that song, and Bobby took about a minute to get into the batter's box. Like everybody was yelling at him, like, "Come on, go!" You know. So he's just letting it play out, and then he hits one off the wall, gets a double, and then a batter or so later, they laid down, or no, it had to be the next guy because there's nobody out. They laid down a bunt, and it was up the first base line. And this, I think, epitomized Bobby as a player. But my cat's coming out too, so we're about to have another visitor. But they laid down a bunt down the first base line, so the catcher goes at the first base line to field it, slides on his knees, bare hands, throws the guy at first. Well, nobody was at the plate, and Bobby never stopped running. And he scored on a sac bunt from second, and the Keys won the game 1-0. But I don't think you had enough time to really go to the bars after the game because it ended around midnight. But that was a famous Bobby Stevens moment, and I thought it epitomized him as a person and as a jokester and a player.
They knew
good heads up baseball.
Somebody had to know that was my walkout song. And they're like, we don't care who wins the game at this point. Like, we need to get this game over with.
I know. I think that you said, did they know that was my walk-up song? I'm like, I did not tell them.
That's awesome. I remember that. I do remember that. It wouldn't come to top of mind because there's other Myrtle Beach stories. I've told one on this about going out with Zach Britton and the whole thing. That one when. Adam, you were I'm almost positive you were there with Richie Hebner and the whole blow up in the dugout. I've told that story, but that one doesn't come to mind until you just told it now. I do remember that. That was that was great. I remember thinking, like, why is this game going so long? We only have 3 days in Myrtle Beach. Like,
no one's in the stadium. The Myrtle Beach
Nobody.
Visiting clubby would like have the hangover cure ready he knew the first night you went out on the town. A lot of times it would actually be the first day you played because you might have been able to get in town early enough to party. But It was hilarious. Like the Gatorade and the ibuprofen he had just laid out on the table, ready.
Pedialyte.
Pedialyte, yeah. Hilarious.
That's awesome.
He probably got a good tip, man. He knows what's up.
Exactly.
Hey, they work on tips, definitely.
Well, Adam, really appreciate you being on the show, man. You have a great perspective, and this is I think this is a really timely time to have you on with all the just minor league stuff and major league stuff, and yeah, it's a crazy time in baseball right now.
It really is. So hopefully we'll see a new day soon. So
yeah. Is there anywhere on the web that people can follow up with you?
Yeah, I'm mostly on Twitter, and that is @Pohl. So my last name's Pohl. Adam, ADAM. So @Pohl Adam. And I tweet a lot in the winter about, a small D1 college basketball team and a lot in the summer about Orioles minor league players. So.
All right, there you go. So be sure to follow Adam Pohl on Twitter. Bobby, want to send us out?
Yeah, join us Friday. We have Chelsea Ladd coming on, Dugout Dish podcast and blog. Adam, this was great. I'll catch up with you outside of this as well. But thanks for coming on. We'll see everybody Friday.
Yep.
That sounds great.
Care.
Thank you, guys.